think this year we had 76% of the request for trail construction projects. So of the available funds, we would just go ahead and put 70% of those funds directly to construction projects. We decided with this increased desire to be focusing on maintenance, we actually upped what would have been only 19% of the available funding going to maintenance. We actually decided we wanted at least a third of the dollars going to that, which allowed us to fund that at a higher level than we previously had. Had that discussion with the commission, with the committee, obviously took that to you last week. And it's a little bit hard to break it all out, but total last week we had 16 grants awarded for a total of $2.68 million. And 5 of those were maintenance grants for a little over $600,000. So still not an overall super large percentage, but looking back at previous years, and again, since we didn't have it completely separate, it was a little bit comparing apples to oranges, but just doing a quick review of the projects, our staff estimated that if you would have had the cycles last year, it would have been a total of 2 grants for $96,000. So again, 2 grants for $96,000 to an increase of 5 for $600,000. We do see that was a pretty significant increase, and think that's the right direction we want to be going with this. So with that, our recommendation in the conversation with the State Trails Committee and the State Trails Program is to directly request approval to continue that pilot program of having a construction, maintenance, and planning support category separated out. We feel that additional pilot year will allow us to further evaluate this effectiveness. And quite honestly, although everyone seemed very positive about it, just with the current financial conditions and financial uncertainty, quite honestly, for a lot of our applicants, whether they be a nonprofit or government agencies, we want to try to be as flexible as possible and be able to respond to their needs in this upcoming grant cycle. I know initial conversations, and certainly it's all over the news, of course, the huge increase, specifically thinking here in the Front Range, seeing stories here recently around local open spaces, really needing to start thinking more about maintenance as they're seeing this increased need. Folks wanting to come out and use the trail at much higher levels, much earlier in the season than they've ever seen before. And of course, with this unknown funding situation, we feel that doing this pilot again will give us a chance to continue to reevaluate and come back next year with some stronger recommendations. So with that, I will open up to any questions.
Dan, I kind of lost you there, but I think you are opening to questions. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Fletcher. I'm opening to questions. Yes, sorry. Oh,
sorry. Yeah, Fletcher. Sorry, I was looking at participants, looking at way too many screens and had way too many names. Sorry, Fletcher. Okay, let's see if I can get my participants list up again and see if there are any questions or discussion. Fletcher, I will say this is a big thank you. I know this is something that the commission, I think pretty much as long as I've been on it, Bray and V-Hill, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe have been having this conversation about how do we really make sure we're taking all of the wildlife impacts into consideration and ensuring that we're doing as much as we can with good management and maintenance and planning and construction only, new trail construction only when we have to. So I really appreciate Fletcher, you and your team hearing us on that, and I appreciate the update. Any other questions, discussion? I don't see any hands. Okay, with that, is there a motion to approve the 2021 non-motorized trail grant pilot categories as presented by staff?
So move, Commissioner Garcia, to continue the pilot program.
Great, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Schaefer with the second. Laura, can you call the roll, please?
Adams?
Yes.
Recto?
Yes.
Bray?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Haskett?
Yes.
Hauser?
Yes.
McDaniel?
Yes.
Schaefer?
Yes.
Barty?
Yes.
V-Hill?
Commissioner V-Hill has a hand raised, but I don't know if he's off of mute. Jim, can you hear us? Oh, I see you, but it said, oh,
Did you get my vote?
there you are. Go ahead, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Zimmerman,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Fletcher, you are still on with agenda item 17, planning trails with wildlife in mind.
Yes, we will keep it rolling. So again, thank you for Madam Chair, directors, members of the commission and council. The final item I have today is an informational item, an update on this effort we're undertaking to update the Planning Trails with Wildlife in Mind document. So in 1998, the Colorado State Trails Program convened a multifaceted stakeholder group to design and write the handbook, Planning Trails with Wildlife in Mind. The document's stated purpose was to support all Colorado land managers in planning for trails while incorporating strategies to address wildlife impacts. At the time, Colorado was nearing 4 million residents, and there was a realization that as we create more and more recreational opportunities to get people outdoors, we need to become more thoughtful on the approach of where those trails end up on the landscape to minimize the impact they will end up having. The result was this document, which became a guiding document the State Trails Program shared widely to help these land managers as they begin to consider the appropriate places to create these new trail systems. While we fast forward 2 decades, while much has changed in Colorado's conservation and recreational landscape over these 2 decades, this conversation obviously is still vitally important. Our state population, of course, now sets at or very soon to exceed 6 million people, and our state demographer forecasts an additional 1 to 2 million people coming here over the next several decades. And of course, as we all know, based on the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that of course was discussed in the previous agenda item, the appetite for enjoyment of the outdoors has never been stronger. 92% of Coloradans took part in at least one outdoor activity every few weeks, with many of them performing several activities a week. And in particular, trail use, looking at the actual data that was collected by the agency that helped us put that together, translated to an estimated 400 million user days out on a trail, meaning in 2017, there were 400 million user days. To put that in perspective, all other forms of outdoor recreation combined equaled a total of 235 million user days. So just a lot of people on the landscape, which of course is something that this body is certainly well aware of. So last summer, we convened a mix of regional staff, wildlife biologists, our wildlife managers, trails program, planning and policy, resource stewardship, GIS staff, as well as land use coordinators. So really a great cross-section across the agency to have this discussion. As we know, as the agency, as our mission includes both providing wildlife management and world-class outdoor recreational opportunities, this is an effort that, of course, we need to lead. But there's also recognition from this internal group that we really need help from our partners to make this a successful and relevant update document that would be utilized across the state. So as we begin to have this discussion back in 1998, they convened this task force of external partners, and we realized that that was going to be the direction we needed to go with this, because a partnership like that will allow us to work toward these shared objectives and ensure that we're actually having practical solutions that work both on the ground, as well as having the conversation around this kind of larger strategic level, as obviously we know has been discussed earlier in Jody and Dan's presentation. Another piece to making sure, the reason we needed to really have partners involved with this, of the 45,000 miles of trails we have mapped in Colorado, less than 2% are on lands managed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. To put it in perspective, the Forest Service manages approximately 60% of the trails in the state, and the Bureau of Land Management 24%. So we know that we would need the support of our partners to enable us to make this work, excel at this work of protecting and caring for our most valued and valuable resources. So in the discussions with our internal group, we realized that we needed to bring these folks together, and we had the discussion that we would have an external task force made up of these representatives. So we would have these federal and local land management agencies with a geographical mix to come together and really be able to receive feedback and input from these agencies that will actually be that are actually in charge of managing the trails. We task this task force with creating an outline, rough draft of this document. And we began this process back in February. As you can imagine, of course, we had visions of doing this over the course of multiple in-person meetings with the goal of having something done by this summer. Of course, and I'll echo Commissioner Hauser's comments from earlier, using the popular term, we've had to pivot into really changing our entire strategy with this. And we've got a great facilitation team that we brought on, a third-party facilitator group that's been helping us. And we've now moved to full virtual engagement meetings. And while we're certainly, I'll be honest, a little bit behind as far as just time together as we would have wanted to be, as of course, our various partners we've been working at, they've been called into COVID-19 related additional duties as assigned as well. We still feel comfortable we'll be on track to have an outlining by June 30th that our CPW staff, local, state, land managers feel confident that we can begin to stand behind, that this is the information that we need to be putting out there when we put out our trail grant applications. We're sharing with the general public, our recreational trail users, as well as our partners, our conservation groups. And I know earlier in the North American model presentation, the conversation about the Colorado's outdoor principles came up. And we actually, in the initial kickoff with this external group, we used those as part of the kickoff for that inaugural meeting. We know that these principles need to be at the root of this collaborative effort, because we're building a document that kind of underscores that mutually beneficial roles. And in particular, we discussed, I think it was number 3, that both conservation and recreation are needed to sustain Colorado's quality of life. Both are beneficial to local economic well-being, for personal health, and for sustaining Colorado's natural resources. However, we also recognize that all recreation has an impact, and Coloradans have an obligation to minimize these impacts across the places they recreate in the large landscape through ethical outdoor behavior. So we put those up to really help drive this conversation. And as we began working with this group, we also realized, of course, that we need to have these additional stakeholders. While we limited this task force to our government agencies that have this land management responsibility, we wanted to make sure we're involving our stakeholders. And so, as you see, we've, again, pivoting, if you will, we were able to present to the Sportspersons Roundtable, the Southern Rockies Conservation Alliance. We've obviously had to go back and revamp some of this approach. So we're performing additional outreach. We're going to be hosting a virtual session of the Partners Conference here in the coming weeks, as well as we're convening an advisory group made up of representatives from recreationists, conservation groups, the land trust community, academic research, as well as Great Outdoors Colorado, to help us provide insight to those who will actually be impacted potentially by some of the conversations we're having here. And so we'll be pulling that group together to really help us have another layer of feedback that we will then share back to the task force. In these conversations, we realized we wanted to be very clear about the audience and the scope of this document. We're really focused, you can see there, well, obviously our internal CPW staff, our federal, the land managers, the applicants, and the users and the conservation partners. We realized we have a lot of these conversations, and we want to do our best to show what the best practices, what are the conversations we're having when our wildlife managers talk to our trail grant applicants, and they're talking about studies, they're talking about the things they're concerned with. We wanted to put all that together and actually share it out directly and proactively with the recreational groups who are coming in to ask about putting in potential trails, so they understand the kind of conversations we're going to be looking at. And also realizing that we're not going to have all the answers. Of course, we know a lot of research is going on to this. And so by convening this task force, we're kind of able to get a better sense of what else is going on there, what else do we need to add, and make this a document that can continue to be relevant. As you see, we have the scope there. We're really keeping this focus on just planning Colorado recreational trails. Considering that impact to wildlife, we've had a lot of conversations about these additional factors that go into this, and so we're really trying to make sure we're pointing out when we have conversation about hydrology and additional impacts that come into these trail conversations. We're pointing out to existing resources and keeping the focus primarily on the wildlife impacts, and really encouraging that early consultation. That in the Trails Grants program we're definitely pushing, but we also realize we're just one of the funders, one of the folks involved with this, so we really want to make sure we're pushing that leadership out beyond just the grants that we're involved with. So again, our goal, we've kind of pushed this to be a draft outline that we're hoping to be able to pull together and then begin to, again, continue to work with our internal staff to actually start building this over the next several months and actually start writing the new document. So again, as the outcome of this process, you know, as the agency that has this mission for both wildlife management and outdoor recreation, we want to lead the effort, but make sure we're doing this with our partners so they understand that it's not going to be successful without them, and also begin to develop this understanding. I think it's important to think about, in the conversations we've had, really overlap a lot with, you know, what Jody and Dan were presenting on, and want to make sure that we're creating a document that can be helpful as, you know, groups like this begin to form, or obviously have already begun to form, how we can help continue to build them up and support the work they're doing, and give them more tools to do this in an even better way. So with that, that's kind of the very large update of where we are. We're preparing for our 4th meeting with the external task force next week. We've already reviewed the 98 document and are preparing that draft outline. We sent that off to them earlier this week for their review, and working again with our internal team is still meeting every few weeks to help us provide guidance based on the best current science, and help us just make sure we're creating a document that's going to work and be as relevant as possible. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Fletcher. This is a great update. I'm excited to see this happen. I know I've certainly referenced that publication before, as have many of our constituents and presenters and staff. So this is a great update. Any questions, comments for Fletcher? Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and echo your comments as well. Just one quick question. In the mailing, it mentions that it's envisioned that this will be a living document. Is part of that, is it potential to have a review either every year, every other year, to ensure that best management practices are occurring, as well as ensuring that there's continued stakeholder engagement? One thing that when you mentioned that this was going to be a partner's presentation, it makes me wonder if whether or not there's a need or an opportunity to sort of reaffirm the goals of this sort of planning rubric on an annual or biannual basis.
It's a great question, Commissioner Schaefer. That's the exact conversation we're having with the task force. Maybe I'll start with this part. We're still trying to figure out, when we say document, do we mean, does this actually, what's going to be most useful to them? So is this going to be something that we print off and, you know, it's in a field size, as some of our partners have requested, that they can actually go out in the field with it and pull it out, you know, put it in their backpack and utilize it in that way? Should this live more as a website? Or most likely, does it maybe need to be a combination of both? And yeah, the comment about the living document, I think, looking at the original document, it's hard to get past the clip art and the fonts to really get into the principles that are in there, which for the most part, as we've been reviewing with the task force, are still very relevant principles. Obviously, we've learned a lot more over the past 2 decades, but I think the idea with that being a living document is to create something that we can, as more research comes up, we can continue to update that. So we've had a couple conversations that maybe we have sort of a collection of some of the best academic research that we've come across that we utilize when we're examining these projects, and keep that as sort of the living piece. And then, yeah, I think that's kind of will be the question we begin to work on with the task force of how do we want to continue to look at this, and then what is the appropriate sort of step to continue to make sure we've got the best information out there.
Yeah, that all sounds great and interesting, because I think just with the research that Colorado Parks and Wildlife is doing into the interrelationship between recreation and wildlife impacts, we're going to learn a lot just in the next 5 years. And so it'd be great to be able to incorporate that in some way, shape, or form. And I'm glad you guys are thinking about it.
Thank you. Commissioner McDaniel.
Fletcher just answered my question based on Commissioner Schaefer's question, so I'm good.
Oh, that's great. We got minds thinking like. Fletcher, this is great. I will echo that. Yeah, it'd be wonderful to see updates on this. And I agree with Commissioner Schaefer that, yeah, we're entering uncharted and exciting new territory. So I'll be looking along as well. Okay, any additional questions? I think Fletcher, you are off the hook.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your time. Emily Urbanic with the GOCO update.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think I have the ability to share my screen and get this going. It's great to be with you all today, even virtually. I think GOCO, we're certainly feeling the angst too that you all articulated at the beginning of this meeting. And before I jump in, I do want to echo all of the enormous appreciation of Laura and Dion managing this commission meeting virtually, having participated last week and today. I can only imagine what a lift that is. So huge shout out to them and their teams and everybody supporting this virtual effort. So as Commissioner Hauser and Commissioner Garcia mentioned, we are thinking really actively about our response to COVID, and I wanted to talk to you about that before I jumped into strategic planning. Our offices, similar to CPW, will be closed through May, and we too are learning how to be virtual through committee and board meetings. And in fact, just last week, our open space team went on virtual site visits for the special opportunity open space round that we are currently reviewing internally at GOCO. So they were across the state on private land and ranches from their kitchens and home offices. So, and that seemed, getting an update from the team seemed to work relatively well. So as it relates to funding, we're thinking how we best reposition our competitive money for the upcoming fiscal year as it relates to COVID response, thinking through a recovery first lens. We currently have a partner survey out to local governments and land trusts across the state to understand both their immediate challenges and then their thinking for the longer term impacts around COVID and how GOCO can best support them through this process. We're initially probably thinking about longer timelines, flexibility with scope changes, that sort of thing. We're also engaged in conversations about how to put people back to work, specifically through Youth Corps and the Conservation Corps model that we're really excited about. And we're excited about working with CPW to understand potentially how increased core work can best achieve the agency's priorities while working in partnerships that really gain efficiency. So those are very active conversations at GOCO. And we are checking in regularly with Justin and his team, understanding how we can best exercise flexibility for CPW at this moment. Our board has already approved extensions for open capital projects with funding set to expire on June 30th. We fast-tracked the Fisher's Peak payment to the agency. We weren't anticipating seeing that in a bill until later in the summer. So really trying to be responsive as possible. And moving on to the strategic plan, I'm going to move quickly through the next few slides as you all have received significant updates from me via email over the last month or so. But I did want to touch on the timeline really quick. Our planning process has been nearly 18 months long. It began with over 100 interviews in early 2019, and that included voices from CPW leadership team and the commission, a literature review that heavily leaned on CPW's priority documents, and all of that informed our guiding principles and strategic direction that we've been moving towards in the last year. So the 3 ideas built into that strategic direction are in front of you on the screen. And GOCO staff has spent the better part of last fall iterating on those ideas with partners across the state. Many conversations with CPW. There were points last fall and last winter that Regional Manager Ackerman probably should have been on the GOCO payroll for how much we were talking to him and vetting these ideas with him and some of his team. So we packaged up all of our learnings from that process and took them out to the people and communities of Colorado on our listening tour and roadshow. And we were almost done with our 14-stop tour before COVID hit. We had 2 stops left. So we got in 12 community open houses along with stakeholder roundtables. So that brought us to our March board meeting, where our board had really robust and thoughtful conversations around the draft plan at that point. And the commission and CPW leadership team received the draft plan from me on April 24th. So instead of reading slides to you, I'm going to fast forward unless there's any questions to really digging into the changes that have been made since our March meeting. Let me pause here.
Any questions? Thanks, Emily. I'm just going to open the participants, see if there's any hands raised, any questions. I know we all got emails. Emily, thank you for those updates. I don't see any hands raised. I'm not getting any text messages, so I think you can continue. Oh, wait, Commissioner Schaefer.
Actually, I'll wait until after the strategic plan.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Great. So again, we had a great board meeting at the very tail end of when we could still meet in person. So that conversation, along with pretty robust written comments from our board, have been incorporated into the final draft that you receive. At a staff level, we sat down again with Dr. Nita Mosby-Tyler, who has really supported our thinking around equity over the last year. And we know at GOCO that we're just at the beginning of this journey and trying to figure out what our best role is. And we really are striving for progress, not perfection, as it relates to our work in equity. In my April update to the board, to the commission, I noted that we have changed what we were initially calling our equity principles to how we engage with our partners. Since then, we have included a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our planning document. And we've also strengthened our language around our equity work internally as it relates to how GOCO operationalizes it. Additional changes, we have revised language throughout the program portfolio and strengthened our language around measurement and evaluation. We're going to begin working on an implementation plan that will take us through the next fiscal year, building out a lot of these ideas. We recognize that the devil is in the details, and so are going to spend the next year building programs around these large philosophical ideas captured in the planning document in front of you. So our next steps with the plan, our public comment window will open up on May 22nd after our committee meeting. We will finalize our spending plan as it relates to the upcoming fiscal year and the foreseeable years into the future. We're going to work diligently on planning for our transition year. We had always built in the concept of a transition year with this plan because it is such a shift to a values-based program portfolio. We didn't want to pull the rug out from our partners. So, if there's ever a time to think about COVID response, we had built in this buffer year to really grow into our new programming by 2021. I want to thank CPW staff up and down the ladder across the regions. We had tremendous participation, both in the planning year and the development, but then When we went out on the road, we had a number of CPW staff participants at open houses and at the round tables. So, you know, this plan is certainly flavored with CPW, our largest partner. I've received some comments from the commissioners, but please feel free to send me, to send Chris, any comments or thoughts you have by Friday, so we can get those, we can include them in our next strategic plan committee meeting on May 21st. Any additional conversations around strategic plans before I move into the next update section?
I think go ahead with the updates, and then we'll just save all the questions to the end.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
We have been doing other business outside of strategic planning. I did mention in my April update that the board approved CPW's fiscal year 21 investment plan. That is no small endeavor. That plan directs just under $38 million of funding. I included that document in my April email, and it's a really great starting place to better understand the GOCO CPW relationship and everything that's funded in the agency. I specifically wanted to thank Jarrett Ellis. He joined Justin's team late last summer, and this was his first year putting together that really significantly detailed document. It was a pleasure working with him, and I look forward to working on the upcoming year's investment proposal with him. We the partners around the Restore table have been planning on announcing the award recipients at the partners conference, but given the situation we're in, we have that will no longer happen in person. Grant recipients will receive an email by the end of this week, letting them know that they will be receiving Restore funding. And I will make sure that the commission has a list of those projects. I know many commissioners are interested in that program and the impact that it's had. Again, just really unprecedented demand. We received 57 applications requesting just under $20 million with about $2.7 million to award in this initial year of funding. And we're hopeful that when we release the RFP next fall, that maybe we can do some sort of celebration around this year's award recipients. I just wrapped up review meetings for the CPW Directors Innovation Fund, which is a program designed specifically for CPW staff to access GOCO funds more directly. I'm sitting down with the director next week to talk through those recommendations and look forward to sharing those projects with you all in June. And finally, this is specifically for Director Prenslow and his affinity for Wilder. Our communications team and Generation Wild partners have pivoted significantly in the last month, retooling the Generation Wild campaign to, in light of COVID, to a stay wild, stay safe message. So we have several Wilder Zoom backgrounds on generationwild.com, along with a lot of inspiration for ways that you can get outside close to home, things that you can do in your backyard in light of what we're all going through, and recognizing that the mental health benefits of the outdoors are probably more apparent than ever right now. So we will be updating the Generation Wild website along with our social media channels regularly with ideas and inspiration. And that's it for me.
Great. Commissioner Schaefer.
Just a quick couple of things. One, since I pretty much every meeting mention it, I'm super excited about the Restore grants going out and seeing some work happening on the ground, hopefully through this year. and improving habitat across the state. The other one, I really want to give kudos to GOCO for including the land acknowledgement in the strategic planning document. I think recognition that the current state of affairs in terms of who is on what land should be marked and understood that it's marked by some heartache, and I don't see any harm in acknowledging that the past has brought us here. So I appreciate that inclusion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Garcia.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I mentioned earlier, GOCO has had several meetings. We had an executive council meeting yesterday. And obviously anything we talked about will be going to the full committees in May and then to the full board before any ultimate decisions are made. But I can tell you that GOCO is taking this COVID very, very seriously in terms of the budget. As Emily said, you know, it was time for us to redo our 5-year spending plan. And we have decided to put that not on hold, but to do a 1-year plan and then really develop the plan, the 5-year plan more next year. And so the 5-year plan at this point in time is a rather loose plan, leaving for all of the contingencies that may arise. We know that the economic effect to CPW and GOCO is not just the next few months, it's not the next year, it's the next few years. And so we are operating accordingly. We know that our partners out there in GOCO are facing some of the same challenges that we are. We may have people whose grants can't move forward because simply they just can't do the work. Just those types of things. And people like Jackie and Emily are doing a lot of work to see where the people are on the grants that we've already sent out, to see whether they're able to progress with those grants. And luckily, it looks like they are in the large part. But again, looking to the future, and I can tell you that Chris and Josh and Emily and Andrea are working constantly with Justin and with Dan because CPW's economic consequences as a result of COVID-19 are being felt by GOCO as well. We'll see tomorrow, but the lottery numbers are down. There are just so many moving parts. And so I just want to say thank you to the people at GOCO for all of the work that they are doing with CPW, and they are keeping CPW's economic interest and the effects of COVID on CPW at the very top of their list. And so I just wanted to make that clear and to say thank you to the people, Emily and the people at GOCO staff.
Well said, Commissioner Garcia. Thank you for that note. And yeah, I will echo that. Thanks to GOCO. Any other questions or discussion for Emily? Okay. I don't see any other hands or text messages. So with that, we can recess for this evening, and we, like I say, tomorrow's agenda, we've got a little change with we're going to put Justin's financial update first, because I think we'll have some discussion around that. And we will see you all again tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.